My name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director for Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. And today is January 7th, 2023. And we are at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Delray Beach, and Florida. And sir, what is your name?
Jeff Grady.
Okay, Mr. Grady. And Mr. Grady, what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Navy.
United States Navy. And when did you serve?
April 1987 until April 1993.
Okay. What rank were you when you separated?
E6, first class.
Okay. All right. And what were you doing before you went into service?
I was a college student.
Where?
And truck driver, University of Maine.
Oh, and truck driver?
Yeah, truck driver. Drove truck on the weekends.
Okay. All right. Okay. How old were you when you entered the military?
20.
Oh, okay.
Just before 21.
Why did you choose that branch?
Well, it's an interesting story. A little cooperation among the recruiters. Well, a lot of the friends that I had from high school had joined the Air Force, as we had an Air Force base. Loring Air Force Base was somewhat nearby.
Right.
So a lot of people did join the Air Force, and after college, and I had no direction what I was doing, so I went down and talked to the recruiter, and took the test, the ASVAB, right?
Right.
And I scored quite high.
Uh-huh.
So the recruiters, sharing an office in a post office in a small town,
Right.
they talked to each other, and then the Air Force guy said, "Hey, Navy guy, you ought to have this one take one of your exams because it's got math skills." Apparently, an engineering college dropout.
Okay.
So, we have math skills above what a normal high school person has.
Right.
And it went from there. I would have joined the Air Force if not for the recruiters actually working together and finding a position that was really challenging for me.
Probably a need also.
Yeah, and a need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the way that went. No problem. So when you went into service, I'm sorry, one more time. What rank were you when you separated?
E6, first class petty officer.
Gotcha. Okay, all right. And what is that equivalent to? Were you an officer?
No, enlisted.
Enlisted.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be like a tech sergeant, or I don't know exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
E6. Yeah.
Exactly. What were you studying in college?
Mechanical engineering, aeronautical engineering.
But you didn't finish your degree.
Didn't finish.
Okay. Did you ever finish?
Yep.
Ever? Eventually?
Yep.
Okay.
But
All right.
the GI Bill was, we worked well together.
Good. I totally get that. Okay, so where'd you go to basic training?
I went to basic training, or where? I went in April of 1987 to Orlando, Naval Training Center, Orlando. Many people are unaware that there was quite a large Navy base just a couple of miles from downtown Orlando.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And how long was basic training?
It was 9 weeks, plus a little bit of cleanup, and then there was some, I don't know how to well describe it, except there was some Division 10 time afterwards, and it was really just for the needs of waiting, basically wait and schedule for classes to begin for A school in my training sequence.
Okay. All right.
So really 9 weeks, plus I think there was like 2 more extra weeks. But we had finished boot camp, so we were kind of like graduates. They left us alone.
Okay.
It was an interesting time.
Were there any casualties in basic? Anybody get hurt? Did you get hurt?
No, I believe we did have someone with a leg injury where they were required to, not use that leg for a week or two, and they were reassigned a different training company after a delay of a couple of weeks. So
they didn't wash out.
Didn't wash out. No, the washout people were from the drug tests.
Oh, okay. All right. Wow.
Which has probably always been.
More than likely. So, okay, so, where was, so that was basic training. What about tech school?
Tech school, also in Orlando.
Oh.
There was we had our own electronics. We had in nuclear power. That's what I worked in.
Right.
There were 3 different trades or technician. There's electronics technician,
Mm-hmm.
and then electrician's mate,
Right.
which is more of like household electricity kind of power, the lineman kind of thing.
Right.
And then machinist mate, where they're really very adept, highly trained mechanical people to actually work on the nuts and bolts and valves and all kinds of things on the reactor plant.
Okay.
So we break into those 3 different groups, and mine was electronics technician. Then we all went to school in Orlando.
And how long was tech school?
28 weeks.
Oh, okay.
28 weeks of tech. We had 2 weeks of preschool, which was the normal thing the military always uses with don't drink, don't do drugs, don't stay out too late, stay healthy, exercise. You got 2 weeks of that training, which is something which I'm sure still happens, probably more now than then.
Okay.
And then 28 weeks of school,
7 months.
and then we had a hiatus after that. We call it A school in the Navy.
Right.
Right. The A is a primary technical school. Usually, someone will go to the. You know the hierarchy of how the Navy usually works.
No, I'm not
You
familiar.
usually join the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
If your test scores are really high, they'll send you to a trade school immediately. If they're kind of normal, they'll send you to the fleet for not a long time, a year, and you'll find something that you kind of like, or the needs of the Navy. They'll find something that you're good at,
Right.
and then they'll bring you back and send you to training for that. So then after the A school, with us, you finish A school. You'd finish A school, and we suddenly became E4. Yeah, we were awarded E4 when we finished our technical school.
Okay.
And then,
Wow.
and then we stayed in Orlando for another 7 months, or after that.
Mm-hmm.
We had a hiatus. It was about 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little less than that. And I drove I called it the non-vital bus. We went over to the recruit area and picked up the new recruits and brought them over to our school.
Oh, okay.
And I drove the bus 1 day a week for 6 weeks,
Okay.
and then joined a class in Naval Nuclear Power School,
Got it.
also in Orlando. Another campus in Orlando on the same days.
Uh-huh.
Very large base. And Naval Nuclear Power School was 6 months.
That was additional to the 7 months?
Yep.
Wow.
It's after that. It was the Naval Nuclear Power School is it's a bit of a famous school for being a high washout rate.
Gotcha.
And
I bet.
it's all reactor theory, math, chemistry, mechanical, electrical, electronic.
Intense.
Intense, yeah. In designed so. You've heard of Admiral Hyman Rickover?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the engineer of power, right?
Okay.
As he's so called, but all based on how he wanted to do it. He wanted his plants operated by enlisted people, and he wanted it operated by people and not by computers. Well, computers weren't really so big.
Right.
And his theories worked. They were proven. We were able to keep the ships moving through anything, really.
Good job. When you say ships, does that cover submarines,
Yep.
battleships, the whole 9 yards? Or?
Well, nuclear power ships for us. I joined during the Reagan Navy when we had over 600 ships, right?
Okay.
We had 16 aircraft carriers, of which I believe 10. I should know this number. Well, over half were nuclear powered. Nimitz class, and then the Enterprise,
Okay.
which was my ship, the USS Enterprise, which is completely different than all other ships.
Right.
And then the Nimitz class, and then submarines, and then we had guided missile cruisers. such as like the USS Bainbridge, USS Truxtun. I really should know these names, but it's been a long time. But we had guided missile cruisers now then that were nuclear powered, which I don't believe we do anymore. I believe only carriers and submarines are nuclear powered now.
Okay. Okay, so after that, again.
After the nuclear power school in Orlando?
Right, 13-month period. Anybody get hurt? Any casualties?
No. We had a lot of academic washout.
Okay.
I believe we had 1 or 2 psychological washout. But no, I believe there was an auto accident. Somebody was killed, but no.
Gotcha.
Nothing. The school's classroom is nice, well-run classroom settings.
Right. So the first year and a half, practically, you spent in Orlando.
Oh, but wait, there's more.
Oh, okay. What do you got?
After you're done with Naval Nuclear Power School in Orlando, then they ship you off to prototype.
Where's that?
Well, at the time you could either to Connecticut, Idaho, or New York. There were 3 different prototypes. I went to Connecticut.
Okay.
North of, everybody knows now, but at the time nobody knew. North of Hartford in Windsor Locks was a chopped up hull of the USS Tullabee.
Okay.
Right next to the airport. And we went there and actually trained on a real reactor plant.
Wow.
And that was another 6 months.
And so this is a prototype?
Yep, prototype, yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Another 6 months?
Another 6 months.
Plenty of training.
I'm
not knocking it.
Neither am I, because the skills I learned, I used years later. And it takes a while for those skills to sink in.
Right.
But now, and even the training on the ship, learning how to operate in each individual plant. You have to learn everything over again because each plant is different.
Okay.
And so anyway, prototype, and then after prototype, we are sent to the fleet. And my choice was carrier. I actually chose carrier.
Where? I mean, well.
Yeah. Well.
Where did you launch from? And then like to find out where you went.
So I was assigned to USS Enterprise.
Out
of when I left Connecticut.
So this is 2 years later.
2 years and 2 months later.
Okay.
Yeah. USS Enterprise was stationed in Alameda, California.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And it was a nice summer.
Which is that north or south? San Francisco?
San Francisco. Yeah, it's Oakland, San Francisco. It's actually nestled right up on the bay next to Oakland.
Okay.
On the west side of the bay.
Right. So, how long were you on land prior to launching?
Well, when I was sent to the ship, we were a fully functional ship.
Ready to go.
I got on the ship and learned my way around. Went out with some friends who I knew and met new friends. And I probably before the end of the week when I was there, we pulled out and went out for some exercises for a few weeks.
Okay.
And then they're called workups. We're getting ready for deployment because we had a deployment that fall.
Right.
This is by now it was 1989, right? So I joined in '87. We're talking. I arrived at the ship in June of '89.
Right.
So at sea for 2 weeks, back home for a week, at sea for 3 weeks, back home for 3 weeks, and it was the whole summer was that way.
Right.
But we had a great time. I mean, it was at the time, San Francisco, Oakland, Alameda. It was a very, very nice city, prosperous city. Lots of nice things to do.
Okay.
And then we left. You know, we went on deployment on a world cruise. Out of Alameda. I think we left in just before Halloween, I believe. And I can look it up too, because when they had the big earthquake where the Embarcadero Expressway collapsed and all that.
Wow.
We left like 2 weeks before that.
Mm.
And then we went off to our sailings around the world.
Okay. Okay. So where was the first stop?
First stop. Okay, you want to know ports. Sea story time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What was it like? Okay, so where was the first port, and then I want to ask you something else.
The life on the ship. We'll circle back to life on the ship.
Go ahead. We're on the same page.
Everybody always wants to know this too. First port, Hong Kong.
Mm.
Hong Kong. Well, and it was San Francisco was a big city, right? And I was a bit. I mean, I'm not New York. I've been to New York, big city, Washington D.C.
Right.
You know. Hong Kong, really big city. I mean, it makes San Francisco and New York look small.
Okay.
And it was quite fun. It was quite a big cultural difference, more than going to Toronto or Vancouver, which there's some cultural differences there.
Right.
It was really, really nice. It was nice to visit a foreign port. The people were welcoming. We had a great time. All the money that we saved up by being at sea for
weeks at a time.
Probably 8 weeks or something like
Wow.
that before we got 7 weeks.
Right.
It wasn't that long, maybe 6 weeks, I don't know. Of course, we don't spend any money on the ship, so what do? You go to port and you spend all your money.
Okay.
So the port liked us too.
Right.
So it was really, really fun. We had a great time.
How was the food on the ship?
Excellent. Yep. I was on the ship long enough. I was on the ship for 4 years. I saw some of the cooks come and go. In general, they're all exceptionally skilled. They can make meals better than cafeteria food out of sometimes difficult to procure ingredients.
Gotcha.
And they got in their groove. There was always the mess specialist, right? There was always the one who specialized in breakfast, and that's what they did.
Right.
And then there was the one who was the short order burger cooker, whatever, and that's what they did. And then there were the others that did the soups and things like that. Large staff. It was 5,000 people on the ship. It takes quite a few people to do the cooking.
Right.
But I was impressed. I mean, there were some things that were just a surprise. That it was kind of like, oh, not that. Like the only one I can put down was the dreaded breaded veal patty.
Okay.
Which usually came out burned on one side and frozen on the other.
Oh my God.
And I don't know why. I think that the staff didn't like the product and didn't like cooking the product. And we didn't like it either. So it was a mutual dislike for it. And we all understood it. It wasn't like you guys are doing this in. It was like, oh, we have to use these because they bought them.
Right. Wow.
But generally they did a really great job. There was pot roasts and stews, roast chicken, almost anything you can think of.
Right.
I was impressed by it.
Okay. All right. So what was Hong Kong like?
Hong Kong, really busy. So many things moving in so many different directions. It's almost a little bit difficult to comprehend at first.
Right.
San Francisco was a busy city, but in Hong Kong, it's like, okay, they had roads and they were painted, they had stripes on them, but they didn't seem to pay much attention to the stripes. And they did this all without accidents, and it was a very friendly city.
Right.
Hong Kong was very friendly. And the police officers there, they had a blue insignia on their lapel.
Okay.
And they spoke English. Which I would say over half of them had that.
Right.
And some of them that spoke English with a British accent. So it was, if you were lost, you could actually ask one of the police officers for how do we find our way back to the bus station or whatever. And they would tell you, oh, right over there. No
Right.
problem. It felt very, very safe. We went off into explore on our own.
Mm-hmm.
We knew about some of the places that were better to stay out of. But the flea markets and the cities, the malls, the shopping, a lot of British pubs, of course, was still a British territory.
Right.
A little bit of an expensive city, but not terrible.
Mm-hmm.
No more expensive than San Francisco at that time.
Mm-hmm.
We enjoyed it. We had great times in restaurants and shopping. Take the Victoria's Peak, I believe, the funicular that rides up the mountain up to the top of it to overlook Kowloon Bay.
Right.
That so we did the touristy things.
Gotcha.
It was fun.
Okay.
Hong Kong was a lot of good times.
Next port.
Next port after Hong Kong. Let me get my memory straight here. I think it was Subic Bay, Philippines.
Okay. So you're still in Asia.
Still in Asia. Yep.
And how long was that?
We went to Subic Bay a couple of times because
Okay.
Subic Bay was one of the largest, really one of the largest military installations in the world.
Oh.
But it was definitely one of the largest naval installations. We pulled in with a couple of aircraft carriers and battleships, and we were there for a couple of weeks maybe, because we had some repairs, aircraft repair, because they fly the aircraft off the ship.
Right.
And of course, Clark Air Force Base, which we didn't go to, but QB Point Naval Air Station was a repair facility. So all the heavier repairs that they really didn't have the parts in stock on the ship, they took care of all that in port.
What model planes were you flying off the ship?
The ship we had, of course, we had still F-14s. That was F-14 was the heavy, did most of the work on our ship.
The standard at that time?
Was the standard. We did have F-18s,
Oh,
but F-14 was the workhorse.
okay.
And then we had, of course, had the E-2, which is the propeller with the dome on the top of it, that little pancake thing. And then we had...
Was that for reconnaissance?
Yeah. Yeah. And then C2 was a cargo version. We flew cargo, the mail bag, for instance.
Okay.
They flew that in and out quite frequently. And then we had the A6s, the intruders.
All right.
And I think they were somewhat anti-submarine. There was a lot of the planes were cross-capable. Of course, I'm not an aircraft expert.
Right.
I'm more of an expert at making the ship go and keeping the lights on.
Okay, that helps.
But yeah, we had I know we had A6s, we had intruders, Tomcats, helicopters. I'm probably missing some of them. The Airedales could name them all for you.
Yeah, that'll work.
But we watched a lot of flight operations.
Where else did you get to travel?
Well, Hong Kong. We also went to Singapore.
Okay.
It was in Christmas of '89. Was in Singapore, and that was Singapore struck me as the cleanest city I've ever been to.
Really?
No chewing gum. They don't sell it. You're not allowed to have it.
Wow.
Don't chew it. You'll get in trouble. It was a bit of an expensive city. Very nice, gorgeously decorated for Christmas. Nice restaurants, shops. We had a good time everywhere we went. And then I think we went back to the Philippines again after that. And then we went up through the Straits of Malacca into the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
Past Diego Garcia. And then we made big circles in the Indian Ocean for a very long time. And that's during the time when we were actually on our way to Rio de Janeiro from the Indian Ocean. And while we were making our big circles, some of the things started happening that happened before the whole Kuwait invasion. There was things going on beforehand. And we got a replacement. Came in, I believe the USS Carl Vinson.
Right.
Right, boat 70. they came in and relieved us. And by then they had the, who did we sail with? It'd be interesting. We'll circle back to the ships that we sailed with, because we sailed with some pretty interesting ships.
Okay.
But after that, we'll continue our path around the world. So we were excused from the Indian Ocean. We went to Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
And that was really just more of a, it was one, the U.S. military bringing a whole bunch of ships into the harbor in Rio. As a show of good faith. And we had been at sea for 69 days at sea.
Okay.
That's for an aircraft carrier, that's a long haul.
Really?
Submariners, maybe not so much, but for a surface ship, that's a long time at sea. So we pulled in, and of course we have 2.5 months of pay we had spent. We had, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 sailors in our task force that pulled in that port. Wow. And we just spent 2.5 months of pay in 5 days. Mm-hmm. Probably not that much, but the city liked us.
I bet, yeah.
We had half of the city bus fleet on private charter, and the restaurants were packed full. It was a little bit, looking back, maybe a little bit rude, but it was a lot of money when they had very, very serious inflation problems at that time. This would have been February 1990. So they really needed U.S. money flowing in there, which they got a lot of it. And then after Rio, we went to, we were headed up to be restationed. Actually, part of this whole thing was moving the ship from Alameda over to Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
That was part of the purpose of this move.
Round the world trip.
Round the world. Actually, we called it the World Cruise, 89-90.
Right.
And after Rio, we made circles in the ocean some more, and went to St. Thomas.
Ah, the Virgin Islands.
In the Virgin Islands. Yeah. Then after St. Thomas, went to Fort Lauderdale. And then from Fort Lauderdale up to Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay. Were there any casualties or injuries?
There were.
There were?
Yeah.
Like what?
I left the port out. Pattaya Beach, Thailand.
Uh-huh. Hold on. Give me a minute. Okay, let me... Give me a moment.
Chip full? Chip full?
Might be. There's...
The red light was flashing on the top.
Right. I've got another card.
Okay, we can pause for a moment. I'm not in any hurry, actually.
Okay, let's see. This is the first. Okay, I needed to change it, and I did. There we go.
Okay. So I did leave out a port.
Where?
Pattaya Beach, Thailand, which is about, I don't know, 60 miles from Bangkok.
Okay.
We went there. We went there just before Singapore. That was an interesting city.
Where was that again?
Thailand.
Okay.
Pattaya Beach. Pattaya Beach is it's now a resort port.
Right.
And it's about an hour bus ride away from Bangkok. Bangkok is difficult to reach. You know where to reach Bangkok with a large ship. A small boat can make it to Bangkok, but not a large ship.
Okay.
So that was fun. Straw markets and food. It was an interesting port. We had a good time. It was nice to get off the ship a little bit.
Okay. So, any more ports?
Fort Lauderdale. No, that's it.
We were talking about casualties.
Yeah, we were talking about casualties.
Right.
Okay. We had some which are. There was somebody in Hong Kong who was hit. Any real wasn't really work related or ship related. other than like, the person maybe had forgotten that the buses come from the other direction in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Which, I guess really could happen. We did have one person on the ship who was crushed by the tugboat for the airplane tug. The little low tractor that they tow the airplanes around with.
Right.
There was a younger sailor. Something went wrong. I don't know what went wrong, but was crushed between the aircraft and that tug, and I believe he passed away.
Wow.
We had someone who, I guess there was a prop strike. They weren't killed, but somebody was made contact with a moving propeller, which I can imagine how unpleasant that was.
Absolutely.
There was one more which involved an aircraft, and I don't know if they've ever released the details on that one.
Gotcha.
But there was it would have been 2 pilots and a deck crew person.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they ever released the details.
Okay.
It was a landing incident.
You mentioned Kuwait. Were you ever in combat?
Not in Kuwait, no. We were in combat zone, but not in combat. My closest to combat was in the Philippines.
Okay.
Because the second time we were in the Philippines, there was a coup attempt. Generals of a dissenting type were attempting to overthrow Corazon Aquino.
Okay.
And we were in this might have been
Wasn't that the lady with the shoes?
No, that was Imelda Marcos.
Oh.
Yep. But yep.
Okay.
So we actually got into an operation. I believe they called it Restore Patriot. Where we put all the ships that were there. Of course, nobody wants to be up here when something's going to happen. So everybody's out at sea, and I believe we destroyed the will of the dissenters with sonic boom. And that was, I guess, 5 aircraft carriers just continually sonic boomed Manila until the people just said, stop, we're done. So with no actual arterial, no shots being fired, just sonic boom. I suppose we probably broke some windows.
Exactly.
But the dissenters finally said, no, we don't want any part of this.
So
and then I don't know whatever became of them, but never heard from them again.
Gotcha.
But that was I think it actually became Operation Restore Patriot.
Okay.
We had another operation up in the Sea of Japan and the North Asian seas. That was where we sailed with. We had I've got photos at home of off the fantail, the stern of our ship, the New Jersey, the Missouri, and the Wisconsin. Right. 3 battleships in a row behind us. And we did a demonstration off the coast of Korea. Probably wouldn't get away with that today, but we had 3 battleships, and they actually had an old cargo ship of some sort, a mile or 2 away, and they fired upon it. Wow. So I've got a picture of 3 battleships lined up behind us, firing at a target, a ship to be sunk, intended to be sunk anyway. Okay. And we had guided missile cruisers and the Nimitz was there, and I believe the John F. Kennedy was there. Okay. So we had 3 aircraft carriers. 3 aircraft carriers plus all the support ships is really merging 2 battle groups, which would put you in the neighborhood of 30 ships, and that's not counting what you don't see. Right. Because aircraft carriers don't go anywhere without a companion you don't see.
Really?
So that was a fun time to just actually sail with battleships.
You said you had photos?
I do at home, yeah.
Are they digital?
No.
No.
35 millimeter.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And they, I actually got to tour the Wisconsin, not an official tour. They'd actually, when we pulled over to Norfolk, a month later or so, the Wisconsin pulled in on the other side of the pier for us.
Right.
Us. So a bunch of us were standing there looking at it, kind of admiring it.
Mm-hmm.
A beautiful old battleship. And the chief comes by and says, what you guys looking at? I was kind of admiring your old battleship. Oh, want to take a look at it? Sure. It turns out he was the master chief of the command.
Okay.
So we got a nice tour of the whole ship, whatever.
Wow.
And we actually set up another tour for the Wisconsin sailors to come take a look at our ship.
Right.
So and that was pretty good. That was not a rare occurrence. That was just a thing that we did at the time, where the ship next to you could almost just go over to it and say, "Hi, I'm from the ship over there. Do you offer any tours?" And they would say, "Come on."
Wow.
Take a look. So we had fun with that.
Nice. Okay. So, you say you got out in '93?
Yep.
Okay. And so, I think, did you mention your GI Bill?
Yes.
What'd you use it for?
Okay. I got out in '93, and I had taken a chance when I got out. I had resumes ready. I was going to go on a fishing expedition and see what jobs were out there.
Right.
And the job market wasn't really the best in '93.
Okay.
It was okay, especially for technical jobs. Then I sent out a couple of resumes and didn't really hear too much, one or two little phone calls. And I thought, I could stay for another 4 years, because I had made E6 in 5 years.
Right.
Just by a chance. I don't know how, but a friend and I both were surprised when we were selected. We went and took the exam, and we scored pretty high in the exam.
Right.
Just because we forced each other to study. So we're going to spend an afternoon cramming for this. So we got our old notes out that I'd saved for the years, the ones before the classified schools. And went through the old notes, studying my old handwritten notes about all this electronic stuff. So when we went to take the exam, we scored really, really high. We both got selected.
Oh wow. Okay. And
so I would have stayed for 4 years and gone up to E7. But as it turns out, one of the resumes that went out got a phone call and an invitation and a plane ticket, and came down and ended up working for a company. I don't know how long you've lived in the area here.
Long time.
Long time. Sensormatic in Deerfield Beach.
Heard of? Yeah, I heard of them.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And that, I got paid a little more than in the Navy.
Right.
I got to travel the country.
Huh.
And which was ideally what I wanted. If I didn't have the travel, I probably would have missed the Navy. But I got out and then did that for a while, and then went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I've got degrees from Palm Beach, used to be Palm Beach Community College.
Right.
Now Palm Beach State.
Right.
Florida Atlantic University.
Uh-huh.
And then Florida International University.
Okay. Did you maintain any of your friendship from the military?
Yep, I did.
Okay.
I've been best man for one friend at 2 weddings. And then another one actually lives in Lighthouse Point. And then there's actually with Facebook now, there's several others that we kind of know each other. It's like, hey, I haven't seen you in years,
Right.
But it's like, hey, guess what day it is? It's like, oh, the day I joined the Navy, So we kind of rib each other about that. But yeah, and then I run into people in school. When I was in graduate school,
Right.
one of the things was stand up in small class, stand up type. The guy's like, yeah, did this and that when I was a Navy electronic technician. I worked on nuclear power. I said, what's the likelihood of us both being in the same classroom?
What was what?
The likelihood of two of
Right.
us being in the same classroom. I actually have an uncanny story about that.
Go ahead.
It's related, but it's kind of a sidebar. My family, especially cousins, my grandfather was a World War I veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got cousins. We were just over at a family gathering. I've got a cousin who's older than me, about maybe 19 years older. And he was in nuclear power in the 60s.
Right.
In the 70s. And then I've got another cousin who his son was there, who's also in nuclear power, did the same exact track I did with the electronic technician reactor operator. So we were sitting there having a beer, and I thought, what's the likelihood of and we were on a boat, a small boat. What's the likelihood of 3 people from the same family going through the same program, each 20 years apart?
Wow.
Sitting here on a boat having a beer.
Right.
So you learn to spot each other too. There's a skill set. I can tell if someone's up. One of the I don't know how we're doing on time, but one of the skills that you have that you learn through the school is it's confidence. If you don't know the answer, you get up and answer as close as you can and prove it. Supporting materials, do the math, graph something, draw something, prove that you know what you're doing, and you can at least make a safe choice.
Gotcha.
So I can spot people doing that, and it's like, you don't know what you're doing, but you know enough. You know more than the other people, and you're making it look like you know a lot more than you know. And it's a skill. It's a skill. You have to have the skill to recognize.
Gotcha. Just a few more questions.
Okay.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
It did, and it still does. I think it was a great program. I mean, I went in as finishing 2 years of college, went in the Navy, did my thing, and I got out, worked for a little while, and then went to night school. And I went through, and I've got an associate's degree, 2 bachelor's degrees, and a master's degree. And I attribute most of it to the GI Bill.
Gotcha.
Now, not all of it, but that's what put me on the track. And I would say over half of the payments came from the GI Bill. And the veterans programs have a different tuition structure anyway than the normal in-state. Or they used to anyway.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, they did affect me, like when I went back to school. It's like, okay, you ask a question, you're going to get an answer. And I knew enough to study enough to actually know what I was talking about.
Right.
But the teachers would eventually say, like, that's a little bit too complete of an answer. You're done.
Okay.
So, and it kind of serves well, sometimes slows me down. When I started in the Navy, when I started actually in prototype and in the fleet, it was a bit of a slow qualifier, especially when I got to the fleet. Qualified, but it was slow. And part of it was I had to understand everything.
Right.
And then finally I was, kind of mentored to you don't need to understand everything. You need to know how all the parts work. You need to know the procedures. You need to know what to expect and things like that. So eventually I got speed and got traction, and before I got off the ship I was probably one of the most qualified enlisted people on the ship.
Okay.
Is because once I was halfway through, I had gone through all the detail in the beginning. Now I could feel that to qualify new stations I already knew all all the things work to just go through and answer a few questions. And, could qualify more and more things.
Gotcha.
So, I still kind of do that now.
Okay. As far as any advice that you might have for young people regarding the military, what would that be?
Don't push it aside, right? Don't push it aside. Strongly consider it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if, and I'm a big fan of the ROTC and junior ROTC and junior achievement. They're all great organizations, right?
Right.
But strongly consider it. You'll learn things. You'll go places. You will be overworked. You will be underappreciated. But you'll look back 30 years later and you're like, you'll say, yeah, that was good. I learned some stuff. It made me a good part of who I am now.
Okay.
And there will be a half a dozen friends that you are lifelong friends.
Gotcha.
But just it's different than a college friend. Different than a college friend.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Volunteer. That's my thing to the kids. If you're not going to volunteer for military service, volunteer for something. Just please be a volunteer.
Okay.
Be a helper, not a complainer.
Got
It's okay to complain if you're doing something to help.
it. Okay. Gotcha. Is there anything else? You good?
Yeah.
So I would just like to thank you for a great interview, and I also want to thank you for your service.
Thank you for the education. You paid for it.
I like a plan.